It's very important, no matter what type of behavioral problem that you have with a horse, that you really try to understand what type of personality you have in that horse and where in the pecking order that horse would be in, say, a herd of 8. It gets to be a little confusing because if you just have 2 horses, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're a number 1 and number 2 horse. You need to try and visualize those 2 horses in a herd of 8 horses. If you were to add 6 more horses, where would they be in the pecking order? Quite often you hear people say when there's a behavior problem that you need to behave more like Alpha. And Alpha in a horse herd is not this drill sergeant that runs around correcting everybody's behavior. That's simply not her role. And behaving like Alpha to a horse that's very low on the pecking order can be very overwhelming and actually traumatizing. When you have a horse that has a behavior problem like this, where it's kicking out, if this young horse were in a herd and it were kicking out at other horses, it wouldn't be Alpha that would be correcting that young horse unless it was Alpha's foal, or maybe the number 2 horse's foal. You have a herd pecking order. You have Alpha up here. She's number 1. Then you have 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. If the youngster who's giving the problems and kicking out belongs to the number 5 horse down here, the primary one that's going to be correcting his behavior problem is his mother, number 5. And 4 and 6, who are also close to her in the pecking order, and their children will also be involved very much in the correction of that youngster's behavior problems. When you're dealing with, say, a number 5 level horse, you yourself need to act like 3 or 4. You don't need to act like Alpha. And definitely if you're working with a horse that's a 7 or an 8, you want to be acting like 5 or 6 or maybe a 4, and definitely not Alpha. That's too much intensity for that horse down there. Alpha passes the buck, so to speak, down through the ranks, and the intensity decreases as you go down through the ranks. I have a short little clip that's kind of cute of something that actually demonstrates Alpha in action. In this video clip, I'm Alpha. My horse is number 2, the goat is number 3, and you can't see the cat that's out of the picture, but the horse and I are trying to do a training session, and the goat gets in the way, and I tell the horse, get that goat out of here. So the horse, being number 2, takes care of number 3, and then number 3 goes and chases the cat. That's herd dynamics in Alpha. The clip I just showed you is a prime example of how you can't decide who belongs where in the pecking order based on 3 individuals. I think you can clearly see that if we increase the size of the herd beyond myself, my horse, the goat, and even the cat that's out of the picture there, that their positions in the pecking order would change as we add more characters to the group. Especially if we were adding horses, the goat and the cat would fall way down on the pecking order. And it's the same way with horses. If it were me, my horse, and another horse instead of the goat, and another horse instead of the cat, their positions would also change when we added more horses. The point I was making with having only 2 horses, and it doesn't necessarily mean that they're a 1 and a 2. You can have a 3 and an 8, a 4 and a 5 living together. You can't really know unless you put them into a larger group of 8. You can kind of check this out when you go out on a trail ride or some other group activity and see where the horses kind of like to be. It's not a true indicator though, because my horse doesn't care if he's up in front, and he doesn't care if he's in back. He doesn't care if everybody leaves him behind. He just doesn't like to be in the middle. So in some cases it's not a true indicator, but you can get a general idea if that's the only way you have to measure it, whether your horse is higher or lower in the pecking order. I hope that I'm explaining this so that you can understand it very well, because it's very important that you understand where your horse falls in this scale before you correct a behavioral problem. If you have a horse that's a 7 or an 8 and you're assuming they're a 1 or a 2 because they're the only two that are there, and you're acting like alpha to correct that horse with that low personality, you can be overwhelming them, and you can actually provoke them to misbehave more by behaving like alpha. It's just way too much intensity. The only time you want to be acting like alpha to correct a behavioral issue is if you're dealing with a horse that's up in this range right here,